Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of Stories for Healing. You know, it's been going on for several months, and it's been a real blessing to be able to meet people from around the world and hear stories from around the world and to just be a part of this community of healing. Today, I'm very pleased to bring back Cassandra Wye, who has a story for us today. Please tell us a story.
Thank you. I want you to imagine the land where I live, where the valleys lead up into the hills and the hills lead up into the mountains. And nestled in the shelter of the valleys and perched to the top of the windswept hills, there are villages, small groups of houses clustered together. And each and every one of those villages in the land down below and in the hills up top, each and every one of those villages, they follow their own unique traditions, always have and always will. But of course, being English, they follow that quaint, quintessential English tradition of never, ever, ever bothering their neighbours. The people down below, well, they go their own way, and the people up above, they follow theirs, and they don't bother one another, not at all. But one day, war came, and the young men, the boys of the village down below, and the boys from the village up above, they were sent to form a fighting unit, a regiment, and sent off to a foreign land that none of them knew. And there they fought against an enemy they'd never heard of. They dug deep into the ground, trenches, and there they cowered, with the rain falling down and the water seeping up into their boots and their flesh rotting as they waited. As their food was stolen by rats, they cowered, waiting, waiting for the future they knew was ahead of them, death. And there was nothing, it seemed, that any of them could do to stop this until one day one young boy had had enough. Ah, he said, what wouldn't I do for a nice plate of potatoes? Potatoes? Said his mate. What do you, potatoes? What are you talking about? The Germans are about to come over the line. Ah, said another one. Oh, yeah, a nice dish of roasted potatoes. Nah, said a third. I think a nice dish of mashed potatoes would be best. Oh, no, said a fourth. All melted with butter. And they started as a joke at first to argue about what the best type of potatoes would be. And they started together to form a fantasy dish. And that joke, that story, that fantasy, it pushed the spectre of their death away from them just a little and brought back a little sanity into their lives. And of course, as the years passed, they carried on building and building this silly dream into what they thought might be a reality. That for once, the people down below and the people above, they could form their own tradition of uniting to grow potatoes together. No longer separate, there would be potatoes for all. And perhaps they could specialize in potatoes, and the fame of their villages would spread throughout the land, and they would win awards for the best potatoes, either mashed or roasted or stewed, they argued. But that dream, that story, that satire kept them going. It kept them alive until at last, boys no longer, they were able to go home. But they kept their dream alive. They threw away their guns, they took out their ploughs, and they ploughed up the land and planted potatoes. They ploughed up the hills and planted potatoes. There would be potatoes for all. And they planned to hold a midsummer feast where there would be lots of different dishes of potatoes, and then someone would be a judge, and finally they would know whether roasted or mashed or buttered would be best. It was such a dream. And everyone loved to see their enthusiasm as they dug. But the people in the village down below, they prospered. Their potatoes grew large and they won an award and their fame spread. But up there on the hills, The potatoes remained small and green and bad to taste, and nobody wanted them. And so the people up above, the old boys, they grew sullen. They started to talk about how they'd been cheated, been conned, been robbed by those down below. And they started to get together to plan their revenge. And so one night, these old men who had been boys together, they remembered how they used to creep into no man's land. And they did the same again, into the village where once had lived their friends. And then out into the fields, and they tore up all the potatoes and they smashed them to smithereens. And the next day, when the men who had once been boys of the village down below woke up, they saw what had happened and they knew who had done it. And they gathered together to plan their revenge. And their voices grew louder and shriller, and their hands turned to fists, and their faces grew red, and they started to shout, "Stop!" said a young boy. Please don't tell me you're going to go to war over potatoes. These were your friends. You can't fight over a potato. And the old man looked at the younger, and their voices stilled. And he told them of his plan. Meanwhile, in the village up above, the old men who'd been so exultant at what they'd have done, their joy turned to fear as they realized what their old friends would do to them. And so they took down their guns and started to polish them. They talked of making traps, of building a fence around their village to protect them. "Stop," said an old woman. "What are you doing? Are you going to go to war over a potato?" "Look," said a voice, and they looked, and coming up from the village below was the young boy, and in his hand he had a small bag that rustled and crackled as he walked. "Stop! It's a bomb! It's a bomb!" "No," said the old woman. "That's my sister's daughter's son. You remember? She married a man down below. He wouldn't harm us. He belongs as much to us as he does to them." And the old men shouted, "No," but she ignored them. And she walked down the hill to meet him. And when he had come halfway up and she had come halfway down, they stopped, about 6 foot apart. And then in silence, the young man placed the bag in the space between them and stepped back. And in silence, the old woman bent down and picked the bag up. And she opened it and looked inside and threw her hands up into the air. "Seeds," she said. She cried, "Seeds! That's all it is." "Yes," said a voice from the village down below. "It's seeds." "Yes," said another, "grass seeds. You see, we were wrong. You can't grow potatoes up on a hilltop. You have to have grass and a few sheep and goats and lambs. We were wrong to think that there could be potatoes for all. We each need to grow what suits us the best, but we still can share. There can be potatoes and lamb for everyone." And so everyone put down their guns and picked up their ploughs and remade the hills that had lived for so long. And they replanted the grass seeds. And in time, the sheep came back. And each and every midsummer, the people from the village down below and the village up above, they met and had a feast of potato and lamb for those who wanted to eat it. And this was long ago, and people have come and gone, but still the two villages meet. And still they have a celebration of potato and lamb for all who come to eat it. And that is how the people of my land learned to make potatoes and not war. And
Oh,
And that I tell for my grandfather, who was in, excuse me, who was in the First World War. And when I was little, he used to take me by the hand and toddle me around the garden and show me how to grow potatoes. And his favourite rose that was called Peace after the
mm,
First World War.
oh,
So
oh,
when you talked about that little image of the grandfather and the child together, I thought, oh, I'll struggle to get through this one.
yeah. Oh my goodness. I will I love it. I love it. I love it. I will say I didn't know how you were going to get out of it. It's a brand new story for me. I've never heard it, of course, and I thank you, thank you.
It isn't actually, it's actually an Asian story.
Is it really
Called
okay?
watering the called watering the melons.
Okay,
And I was challenged by somebody, what story would you tell for the First World War? Because there was all sorts of celebrations, and I just knew my grandfather would not have
sure,
wanted anything
yeah,
to celebrate. You know, he was passionate about peace, and I thought the only story I could think of was watering the melons. But in the original version, the people down below teach the people up above how to grow melons. But that doesn't work in England. You know,
yes,
you grow different things. We've never had monoculture. And I just couldn't make it work. I'm a grandfather, I'm a farmer's daughter. We grow our own food, and
sure.
because we were poor. And so I thought, I wonder if it worked if I changed it. And
It
so I
works. It works. It works.
and I've told it to my friends who told me the original. I'm watching their faces as they're like, but it's a lovely story. And
And
it is.
and and I do. I mean, I love the fact that the answer is diversity. It's not uniformity, and that to me carries as much of a part of the meaning as anything else. So that's
It's being a farmer's granddaughter. I mean, I am a
yeah,
child of
yeah,
two
sure,
grandfathers. My other I'll tell you my other grandfather who was a gypsy. I'll tell you his First World War story next time. But you know that their stories are just embedded in me. And
sure,
we grew our own food because we were poor, so that's what we did. But it was grandfather who taught me.
sure, sure.
And I can't lie and pretend that you can grow the same thing. Maybe you can in Asia. That's why that version is here. But you know, with my
Not here.
feet,
Yeah,
my English soil, it's just
sure, sure.
but it's that diversity in culture,
Yeah, yes. All
and it's
right.
just it's who we are. British people are diverse, and long may it remain.
Well, as are we all. As are we all. Yeah,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course. And but
Oh,
yeah, it's just yeah, it's such a story of what my grandfather taught me.
okay. Well, folks, thanks again for being part of this wonderful series, for hearing these wonderful stories that surprise us and move us and remind us that while we are all humans and all occupying one small piece of dirt running around the universe, there's a beauty in our diversity as well. And we need to treasure both. So until next time.